we've heard multiple reports of U.S. war material not moving around Europe anymore. That's been confirmed by flight data, independently by flight data that's out there. Like, it's real. This has stopped, flat out stopped. So what Trump is saying is he's threatening Putin with, I get to the negotiating table, let us get something done. This has to end. And that's the headline that everybody wants to focus on. But he's doing his part on the other side. He is setting the table for a very good set of negotiations to get Russia to the table. And in no way can Europe afford 5% of their GDP to pay for defense to match the United States. And I don't even think Trump wants, I don't think Trump wants them to do this. I think he wants to use that as a means by which to get to 86 NATO.
You're watching Capital Cause, and my name is Danny. Today's guest is the one and only Tom Luongo from Gold, Goats, and Guns. Tom, thank you so much for coming on, my friend. Good.
Thank you, Danny. Good. How's 2025 treating you?
It's going really well. It's going really well. We're seeing some good channel growth, and it's off to a great start. I want to get your thoughts on what's most topical for you. However, obviously, Trump is in the news. He's the new president, or his second term is a few days in now. I want to get your initial thoughts of what you're seeing so far. What are some of the big stories that you're able to eke out of this new Trump term?
Well, sure. So years and years ago, when I first started doing this, I first picked up my phone and did a Periscope and sort of live streaming back during the first Trump campaign for president back in 2016. I was working with Newsmax at the time. It was, I needed to push out into the real world. I had been hived off behind the paywall over there for years, and I was happy with it. It was comfortable. It was an easy life. And as I started doing that, I got a small audience, which I then immediately got rid of by saying things that pissed people off about Trump later on. We would, I get all in my, I have one too many and go off on a rant. I know you're shocked. And what would happen is people would go, President Luongo, what would you do? And I'm on day one, I'd have the Jumbotron behind me and I'd be I just had a call with Putin, and I just called him to tell the Spetsnaz to go in and wipe out all the CIA guys in Afghanistan. We're gonna live stream it. We're gonna put it on pay-per-view. That would have been my day one thing back in 2016. Well, we're not in Afghanistan anymore. So I got everything else I was going to do on day one with Trump. I'm ecstatic over here. I'm sitting here going, he did that and that and that. And yep. Oh, it's hilarious and kind of awesome. You have it was what we used to do is that geopolitical version of winning the lottery. What would you do if you were president for a day? Right. Well, right. It wasn't hubris or anything. I didn't take it seriously, but this is what I would do. And I was yeah, I'm dude, seriously, this is what I would do. Right. And what Trump is doing now is walking in with a freaking sledgehammer and just breaking everything far beyond, I think, even what the most radical of, and I believe this sincerely because I kind of know these people. The most radical of libertarians don't have the stones to do what he's doing. They say they do, but then they would get into the office and you can just tell because they're just not any good at winning. They don't know how to win. They don't have any real intestinal fortitude. They just sniping from the outside. And so they'd never walk in and actually do what was necessary because they wouldn't be organized enough to do it. They wouldn't have understood the massive problem of getting in there and having a team ready to go to implement everything that needs to be done.
And we got beyond the abstract.
Yeah, we're getting out of our heads and into down and dirty politics. And even Trump, the failure of the first season of the Trump show is that. I mean, there's that whole thing about, if you don't know, if you understand how television is has been and used to be produced, season one was always kind of the test bed. Hey, let's get the writers to figure out what the characters are. Let's get the actors to figure out what their roles are and everything else. And then we'll do a classic, post-season review after, corrective action report, what worked, what didn't, get rid of this character, get rid of these guys, and then season 2 is usually, and seasons 2, 3, and 4 are usually the best of any television show because they've done the beta test. Everybody's comfortable in their roles and no one's gotten tired of doing it and no one's taking it for granted anymore. Right. Well, that's where we are with the Trump show right now. And you can see it. It's everywhere. And so many people don't realize that that's what's happened. He just went to Davos. We're doing this at noon on Thursday, the 23rd, right?
Yep.
Yeah. He just spoke at Davos an hour ago. And he basically did exactly what he did when he was in the Rotunda. He told everybody who are his political enemies and everybody who has sold out the United States, oh, by the way, you're traitors. And oh, by the way, we're tearing down everything you've built and we're going to do it in an hour because it's all brittle bullshit. And that's it. It's gone. And he did the same thing at Davos. And then he started doing Q&A. And I didn't think my life would get any better. And so I turned off the stream after I watched him turn to Brian Moynihan, CEO of BOFA, and who was asking him some milquetoast question about, I don't know, energy or whatever. And Trump just pivoted immediately and said, oh, by the way, Brian, before, I want your assurance that you're going to stop debanking conservatives at Davos. He told fucking Brian Moynihan, get your shit together or we're coming after you. I was like, I'm done. I can die happy now. Like, it's almost like I woke up this morning. I'm like, oh, well, job done. Like, I can do this job from home, which I often do. And like, what else are you going to ask for here? If the bureaucracy, the permanent bureaucracy fights him on half of what he's already put in motion, it's still the most wildly successful presidency ever.
I believe the last interview you and I did, you called it mobocracy. How did Trump get into this position of power now? This time around, I mean, go ahead.
He understands how the game is played now. He understands that you don't just assume the presidency. That the presidency he's an executive. If an executive does not have good VPs of each vertical, he does not have good staff. If they don't have good staff, if they don't have clear directives, then he can't get this done. And then he also has to have some institutional support behind him, which is what I've been arguing for 3 years, that we have a $12 trillion Build Back Better bill in 2021. We have Lael Brainerd in control of the Federal Reserve, the FOMC. We have all of this stuff happening. We never get off the zero bound. We're already doing MMT. We're already doing, massive social credit score stuff. We have bits and pieces of the whole social credit score system in place. And it's because those projects have been on autopilot. They got funded. They've been moving forward, and there's not any real way to stop them under the Biden administration. There's just no way. Because that's what these people want to do. They've got the money. It's been allocated. You've got a Congress that's willing to give it to them. You can't stop that system, right? So, so much of the quote unquote criticism or commentary about these things, just ignores the fact that inertia is a very real thing in domestic politics, geopolitics, culture, physics, and it's real in everything. So in order to change anything, you first got to arrest the momentum and the inertia and shift it back in the other direction. And then, of course, there's going to be a legacy of those systems continuing to move, continuing to operate, and bits and pieces of them operate. Our friends over at Davos, if I want to like use a very Putin-esque construction here, our partners over at Davos seem to think that all they have to do is wait Trump out and then they can get back to doing what they were going to do 4 years from now. That's not going to happen. By the time he's done, it won't. None of it will exist because he understands that you have to root these things out, root and branch, and empower the people deeply embedded in every one of these agencies that has been beaten down and beaten into submission and been running around with their heads down like this for 30 years. And I'm not rocking the boat. No one else wants to. Now everybody's been empowered. Like, go read some of these EOs that he's put out. If you catch anybody, you've got 90 days to catch anybody trying to obfuscate the fact that they're a DEI hire. Let us know what it is. Doesn't matter if you let us know who's doing it. Doesn't matter if you were complicit before. You will not be punished. Just let's get rid of all of these people. Like, all of it. Like, he's empowering people to stand up and take control of their jobs, their careers, their government, their livelihood. And they say, it's up to you. If you want to do it, let's do it. If you don't want to do it, then we'll continue, I'll figure out other things to get rid of. I got plenty of work to do on my plate, but I'd like to get it all done. And
look, no, I was just gonna say.
So yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight is 2020, but if you really think about this stuff, isn't Davos, isn't the wokenistas, as you like to call them as well, weren't they always bound to fail to begin with, given their philosophical underpinnings of rewarding incompetence? I mean, wasn't this all predictable to kind of in a weird way to begin with?
Oh, of course it was. Of course it was. But the question is timing. And then remember, depending on what pieces of the infrastructure they get put in place permanently. And I'm talking now specifically of the monetary system and the way capital flows around the world. If they were able to get all that architected, then they could limp along for an awfully long time and do an awful lot more damage along the way. I mean, look at what they've tried to do in the last 7 months. I mean, Bill Gates is out there still trying to vaccinate cows to keep them from farting. Okay. And he's got EU countries on, destroying their cattle industry. That's damage. That's a war against humanity. That's mass murder, by proxy. Like, it's insane. And yet it's happening, even though, yes, at a head level and at an intellectual level, you can say, absolutely, this is all going to fail because, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money and blah, 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 and all the bon mots that we like to throw around. But the truth of the matter is that these systems are on autopilot. And there's incentives built within those systems to keep them running for as long as possible. Now, you can change them. You can change the incentive structure. But again, it's going to be one of these things. It's going to be very slow, turning the battleship, yada, yada, yada. And how many people are going to resist it? And so what Trump and his team have spent 4 years figuring out is, okay, how do we minimize that inertia as much as possible? I did a podcast with Vince Lanci the other day, and we were about all this. And Vince was like, man, I just don't think Trump's going to be able to get a lot of his energy agenda through. It's going to be nearly impossible because you can't get refineries built, you can't get pipelines built and everything else. And then 48 hours later, there's Trump with an EO saying we're streamlining the permitting process. We're killing all this rotten nonsense. It's all going away. And I sent that EO to Vince. He's like, well, I guess I was wrong. He texted me back like 10 minutes later. He's like, cool. I'm glad and it was like, cool. I'm happy to have been wrong. It was all not, it's all, and they're able to do all of this because of Loper Bright versus Raimondo, because of the repeal of the Chevron deference, because now the president and his staff can literally tell the agencies, you do not have legislative authority. You have been acting under executive order effectively and running around like flying monkeys, doing whatever the hell you want to do. And I'm here to tell you that the Wicked Witch isn't dead anymore. I'm in charge. And you're going to do what I want, or you're going to get out of here. And that's that. And because those executive orders are in place, because there is a leadership structure at all of the agencies now in place to make these things happen, anybody who tries to stop it, drag their feet or whatever, immediately goes to court, immediately gets fired, immediately gets, reassigned to Wichita or to the office in Wichita or wherever they are. And that's the plan. Like, they may think that they're in charge of their fiefdom and their office, their cushy office that they haven't been going to over in, I don't know, the suburbs of Washington, D.C. But, hey, the Department of Interior, by the way, has an office out in, in Twin Falls, Idaho. You've been reassigned there. You have 60 days to show up for work.
Yeah. Well, I've seen a few clips.
Guess what? That guy's not showing up for work in Twin Falls, Idaho. He's going to take the retirement. He's going to walk away.
Yep. I've seen a few clips of Davos over the last couple of days here, and it looks like it's, I don't know, from what I've seen, it looks like a half-empty auditorium. There's a lot of panic in the air. I think you posted a clip on your Twitter the other day about this one panel, and they were lamenting that they had lost. They'd lost to Trump.
Yeah.
And
they so from what I understand, hookers are given 2-for-1 blowjob sales. And can't let that joke not go, dude.
Yep.
But no, I've been hearing this behind the scenes for about 3 or 4 years now, that every year Davos has been in decline. And I've been hearing it from people who are on the ground, people who drive there, or run hotels there or whatever, and they're all saying the same thing, that the attitude there has been a morgue for a couple of years now. And I wrote a piece for my blog back in 2021 called "Have We Finally Reached Peak Davos?" And I tweeted that out along with that. And I linked to that along with that clip. And I was right then. And it was when they went and it failed, and everybody started pushing back, Omicron variant of COVID, which I got, by the way, and I was down for about a day and a half. It's over. It was over then, because they had hit their peak. And then once you're on the backside of it, the first couple of years are going to look like this. They're still in charge. They're still in control. They're still running their Gantt chart, blah, 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 blah. And then the more they keep trying to run their Gantt chart and it's not working, they keep running their Gantt chart. And then it just falls off. It's just think of it as a Gaussian distribution of power. They reach their peak. For the first standard deviation, they still look like they're there. And then you start getting the second and third standard deviation away from the peak of that power, of the center of the peak. And it just drops off like a rock. In 5 years, Davos will not exist.
Now, the Russia-Ukraine war, the Russia-Ukraine war, you could attribute that as a Davos war, right? I mean, would you call that a Davos war?
It's a mixture of Davos and the British remnant, and I always like to make sure that we keep those two somewhat separate, because they have overlapping, concerns when it comes to destroying Russia and neutering Russia, without a doubt. But then they have very different ideas about who gets to run the show after they win.
Right. What do you make of Trump's post on Truth Social the other day, talking about how Putin needs to make a deal with Zelensky, and if he doesn't make a deal, then we're going to slap on more tariffs and sanctions, and what else is there to sanction? Is this art of the deal stuff, or what's your read on this?
Yeah, it is. It is, absolutely. I was asked by Sputnik about this yesterday, as a matter of fact. I think there's I told them, I said, this is Trump. Notice what he's doing. He's also threatening the European Union with sanctions. He's threatening every other country that won't stop throwing weapons into the thing. He will throw the same sanctions on it. He wants everybody to the table. I've also heard multiple things. Joaquin Flores this morning on his Telegram channel reported that, and it's coming out of Ukrainian media, that Trump is planning on arresting most of the Ukrainian government.
Really?
I don't know if it's bullshit or not, but what I'm saying is, we've heard multiple reports of U.S. war material not moving around Europe anymore. That's been confirmed by flight data, independently by flight data that's out there. It's real. This shit has stopped. Flat out stopped. So what Trump is saying is, he's threatening Putin with, I get to the negotiating table, let us get something done. This has to end. And that's the headline that everybody wants to focus on. But he's doing his part on the other side. He is setting the table for a very good set of negotiations to get Russia to the table. And in no way can Europe afford 5% of their GDP to pay for defense to match the United States. And I don't even think Trump wants, I don't think Trump wants them to do this. I think he wants to use that as a means by which to get to 86 NATO. And if these countries are paying 5% 5% of their GDP to defend themselves against the evil Putler, well, they don't need the United States then anymore. Stop acting like poor countries. Or are you really, or is it not an act? Are you really poor countries? Germany, France, Italy, Spain, everybody, or the UK, all of these countries that are so rabidly pro, we have to keep fighting for the plucky Ukrainians. Are you actually rich or not? Because if you can't afford to defend yourself with 5% of GDP for a war that you think is a holy war, you talk about in terms of a holy war of your European values, which as far as these these nihilistic atheist bastards that run the EU, that's their religion. That's the closest thing these people have to a religion. And by the way, I agree with Jordan Peterson. Everybody's got a goddamn religion.
If you
doesn't matter how secular that religion looks on the surface.
Yeah. It's really interesting with the EU and the British and the European continent there, because if you add up their combined military strength of the UK, France, and Germany, it barely comes up short of I believe the Turkish military.
Yeah,
like
it's not even close.
What leverage does Europe think it has to influence anyone?
It has always had in the past. This is a crux of my analysis of the geopolitical landscape. They have always had their people running our country, setting our foreign policy. Trump depowered the SES, the Senior Executive Services within the State Department. That's most of those people who lost their security clearance. Yeah, them. Those are the guys at the State Department who are retired and they don't really work there anymore. They all still have their security clearance, and they're the ones setting foreign policy. They're the ones who've been working with the secretary. They're the seventh floor at Foggy Bottom that needs to be destroyed. Tillerson, when he was first brought in as a Secretary of State, started wiping out main big whole swaths of this at Foggy Bottom, but he and Trump so didn't get along that eventually it had to be that relationship had to end.
Now, this is something I've noticed. Maybe there's something to it, maybe there's not. But you haven't heard a peep from the Russians. Not a peep from Medvedev, not a peep from Putin.
Other than congratulations, yeah.
Yeah, congratulations. But despite his recent posting on Truth Social, you haven't really heard any pushback from the Russians. Like Medvedev would be like he'd be like the attack dog under the Biden regime. Yeah. Granted, it's only been 3 or 4 days now. He hasn't really said anything yet. Is the silence deafening? Does it mean anything or no? What's your view on this?
I mean, like the Russians know that look. I already believe that there's been significant contact between Trump and the Russians for months. I think going back before he even won the election. I think they've been prepping the stage for this for a long time. I'll be honest with you, because when I look at the way, remember, I look at that intersection between geopolitics and capital markets, right? And how those two things reflect each other at different times. And, maybe it's my confirmation bias. Maybe it's my, I've got a hammer that everything looks like a nail. If you want to make that criticism of me, you go right ahead and do so. That's fair. But what I've been seeing, the way I've been trying what I've been teasing out of this for months is that there's been not overt coordination, but a kind of Powell makes this move. Putin seems to make this move. They are always seem to be supportive of each other. And that's been going on for years. And it's been accelerating over the last 6 or 8 months. And Putin knows when to push and when not to push, knows when to let provocation not go unrewarded, unresponded to. And then other ones he makes a very pointed response to, which undermines something else that's happening, and then you see it show up in a bond market somewhere else. And I'm serious, and it's hard for me to explain here because I do this like twice a week for my patrons, and half the time when I'm on a podcast or whatever. And it's always stuff that's like right there in the moment when you're watching stuff happen and you see all these things happen and you're like, oh yeah, that makes that tracks. And as long as I never see anything discordant to that basic framework, which is, and every once in a while you get one, but 99% of the time I'm getting stuff that's confirmatory of that point of view, which is why I keep making that argument. I think this is going to be settled pretty quickly. And Putin's not going to get everything he wants. Trump's not going to get everything he wants. The Ukrainians certainly aren't going to get what they want. But my friends over at the Duran had a great video the other day about the Europeans trying to insert themselves into the peace process to get a veto over whatever it is that the Russians and the Americans decide on. They want to be there. They want, Zelensky keeps asking to be, there and making demands and everything else. I'm like, dude, sit down and shut up. You are irrelevant. You are not part of this process. But they keep trying because they're the ones that want to keep this war going. They're the ones that want to put peacekeeping troops into the rump of Ukraine and then leave them there as tripwires and put American troops there to force Trump into a situation where he has to respond to it. And that's their goal. And I'm telling you, for 2 years now, that has been the game plan of the British and the Europeans. And most of the Europeans, I'll be honest with you, that argue this part of the plan in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war map really strongly to old British interests as well. Like the German Greens are an offshoot of MI6 for all intents and purposes. And it's why you see Robert Habeck, the vice chancellor, out there literally saying we have to wean ourselves off of American oil and gas, and we can't, and Russian. Like, what are you going to do? You guys don't have any energy, and you don't have any money. So what are you going to do? Build nuclear power plants with what? Like, you're broke. That's nice. You've decommissioned half of your nuclear power plants too. Like, you've turned yourselves into third world countries in this quest for a collapse that you think you can come out of first, because they're trying to husband all of their resources, force everybody else into debt slavery to them, and then collapse the world economy and then quote unquote build it back better. And they believe that because they're closer to issuing a central bank digital currency than everybody else across the West, that they can get away with this. And they have institutional control over the flow of capital through City of London and Frankfurt and Singapore and Hong Kong and these other outposts, old outposts of the British Empire. They think they can get this done. I'm telling you here right now, that is not going to happen.
Yeah,
that is absolutely not going to happen.
It seems like these groups are on the way out. It really. But in your view, what is the biggest point of failure? What is the biggest risk of derailing the Trump train, in your opinion? Is it still Davos? Is it something else? What do you see? If you've been watching my channel for a long time, then you know we talk a lot about protecting your wealth in uncertain times. And with everything happening in this day and age in the markets, bank failures, inflation, geopolitical instability, and more, you need a solid plan to safeguard your wealth and your assets. Here's where ITM Trading comes in. They specialize in strategic gold and silver acquisitions, helping people just like you build real, tangible wealth outside of the system. Their team of experts doesn't just sell metals, they create custom wealth protection plans and strategies tailored to your financial goals. Their track record speaks for itself. Just look at their research and client success stories and look at all these reviews here on Google. Don't wait until it's too late. Give ITM Trading a call today or book a strategy session using the link in the description box or the pinned comments down below. I've personally looked at their strategies, and let me tell you, they know their stuff. If you're serious about real financial security, ITM Trading is the team you want on your side. Check them out.
It's the Bank of England. Bank of England keeps trying to get control over the price of dollars around the world. I keep talking about SOFR versus LIBOR, and now the end of LIBOR, and now we have this thing with Howard Lutnick and FMX and that Alex Rayner and I were talking about the other day about setting up a new clearinghouse to compete with the COMEX, which is never going to work, by the way. No one is. The COMEX boys are some of the best mob bosses in the world, by the way. And that he is literally trying to set up, from what I can understand, unless I'm wrong about this, and somebody go out there and disabuse me of this notion, but what has been reported by Bloomberg and others is that they were planning on a new clearinghouse for U.S. Treasury trading in the City of London, backstopped by the Bank of England, with the ability, like John Corzine and MF Global 15 years ago, to commingle, to use margin cash to fund the buying of foreign sovereign debt, Japanese yen, German bunds, UK gilts, blah, 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 blah. What are they trying to do? They're trying to set up an infinite rehypothecation scheme where you buy a U.S. Treasury, you post it as collateral to buy gilts, you use the gilts as collateral to buy JGBs, use the JGBs to buy bonds, and then you go back and buy more treasuries. And then you keep doing the same circle jerk that they've done in the past, because within City of London, infinite rehypothecation is still a thing. It is not a thing in the United States. Okay? And so that means they have infinite freaking leverage over the value and the pricing of bonds. And we don't know how much money how many clients they were trying to get signed up, and we don't know what was going on here. But I'm telling you, having now talked to people inside the transition team, they're like, apparently, from what I understand, they're not happy with the job that Lutnick is doing, getting ready for commerce.
Interesting.
Getting commerce ready. So, now we're seriously wondering whether he's been working for the Bank of England the entire time. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But look, this is the stuff that's in print. This is the stuff that tracks. And so I don't know. It could be something else. It could be simply a means by which for us to have a pool of liquidity necessary that in any global financial systemic breakdown outside of the US, that there's a liquidity pump for our banks and foreign offices. Maybe that's what it's about. I don't know. But I know there's something fucking hinky going on here. And I don't like it. And I don't want the Bank of England anywhere near the clearing of U.S. treasuries in foreign markets, and then being able to set the friggin' price on U.S. treasuries. Because I can already tell you every day, Danny, I get up and I watch the friggin' gilt market, I watch the U.S. Treasury market, I watch gold, I watch silver, I watch the euro, I watch the yen, I watch the pound, I watch the pound euro cross. I watch like 40 freaking markets every day, and at least 3 or 4 of those markets every day has some fingerprint, footprint, boot print of somebody coming in and slamming it to move things back into within one standard deviation of what is acceptable in terms of the pricing of debt, currencies, and everything else. And it's all happening outside of New York trading hours. The worst and egregious stuff used to happen during New York trading hours. Right. Back 2008, 2010, 2007, 2015 was always within New York trading hours. Now it's happening between 3 a.m. and 8:30. That's the European Open and the New York Open. Every day, something weird is happening. Now, that's a shift. It's a fundamental shift.
Lutnick is one of those outspoken people about this, this idea of a Bitcoin dollar, where you have this connection between Tether and USTs, US treasuries, and essentially creating a petrodollar-esque system vis-a-vis Bitcoin. What do you think? I mean, what do you think his aim is with that? Is there?
Well, again, I'm willing to give Lutnick the benefit of the doubt here, because I also know that very much so that Bitcoin is one of the paths to recapitalizing the United States through creating a marginal demand for U.S. treasuries to backstop the domestic repo markets. That's what Tether is, right? That's why it's been blessed. So I don't know. It's a very complicated story, and all bits and pieces of this coming out. Look, this shit was talked about by John Cornyn and Scott Bessent in their private meeting, and then during Bessent's confirmation hearing. And they made a point of putting on the Kabuki theater of making this a thing. So it's a good question. I just know that from my perspective, what I want to see is an end to the Bank of England. I want that as the symbolic end of the dominance of central banks over the value of currencies.
Are these shots?
Shit started with the formation of Bank of England in 1694.
Are these shots that were fired towards Canada, i.e., 51st state? We're gonna cut a new deal. We're gonna cut a bunch of new deals with Canada, etc. Is this an indirect attack towards the
Yes,
UK? Okay.
absolutely, it is.
And Mark Carney, I
Absolutely.
mean, as you well know, is running. Is he running as a liberal candidate, or did he get
Yes,
that?
he's running for Liberal leadership against Chrystia Freeland.
Okay, great. Head of Bank of England, head of Bank of Canada. I mean,
I
it's
know,
right there.
I know. It's literally Canada. You have two choices. Both of them are black. You can have any color you want as long as this one's black, right? It's the whole Henry Ford thing. You can have any color any color Model T you want as long as it's black. Well, in this case, you can have any color you want you can have any leader you want as long as it's Davosian, and globalist that works for these people. See, the problem that I see at this point, and this is part of the problem, is where is the City of London in all of this? I see them as a fulcrum. I see them as a pivot point. Like if I were strategically trying to extricate the United States, if I'm Trump and I'm trying to strategically extricate myself extricate the United States from the vestiges of old colonial control over our nation, and that means controlling trade, controlling the value of the dollar, controlling the debt, controlling the spending, and the politics roll downstream of all that. I have to look at what's going on in the European Union. I've got to look at what's going on in Britain. I know that the situation in Britain is probably even more complicated than it is in the US because it's got hundreds and hundreds of years of history here. And I got to look at this and say, okay, where's the triangulation point? If I'm going to beat them at their own game, which is always divide and rule, I'm going to set you and you against each other to fight in order for me to come in and pick up the pieces. Classic narcissistic triangulation play. Well, where is that point? Is it the crown itself? Is it City of London? Where is it? We know the civil service, for example, in Britain works for Davos. We know that. We know that the prime minister has been chosen by Davos, right? We know that. We know that style globalist, and there's a very large part of the British power structure that is lumped in with Davos, and then there are others who are not. And I would put Nigel Farage in that group, and I would put some of the others in that group. I would also put people like Liz Truss in that group, along with the former Queen Elizabeth II herself. Okay,
who was anti-EU.
Right. Now, when I was covering Brexit back in 2017, 2018, I kept having British people text me and message me behind the scenes and comment. It's like, Tom, this isn't a simple we're declaring our independence thing. This is incredibly complicated. And it's not over. The vote's just the first part. Getting the Brexit deal done is just the second part. We still got to get through 2026 because there's the agreement where we're on the hook for any damages to the EU's economy for the next 10 years. We have to pay reparations to the EU for leaving. It's insane. And this isn't over yet. And if I think back to how they were fighting Brexit up to including the vote, I go back and I think about that. And the major criticism that was leveled at Farage and Brexit was that, well, look, they're not really representing the people themselves. They're actually backed by a whole lot of, oligarchs and business people and billionaires and blah, 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 blah. We're the champions of populism and people. This is typical EU bullshit. But there was a nugget of truth in that lie.
Which was?
Because that City of London really did want, City of London, factions within City of London wanted out of the European Union. And that you can also make the argument then, okay, if there is a functional split there between those two groups, and was Brexit a means by which, not wholly, but the way they would use Brexit after it occurred was to then bring the United States in to triangulate against the EU. They form a common front. And the British are very good at this. They've got hundreds of examples. Richard Poe's got 100 examples of how the British go in, schmooze both, works with one side, schmoozes the other side, and then pulls out at the last moment to get the other two to slam into each other. The Ottomans and the Russian Tsar over Constantinople during the early days of World War I. Classic example of this. Like, go read Richard Poe's articles about Gallipoli, for example, and that the real point of World War I from the British perspective was to get rid of the Ottomans, by the way. It's just one angle on this, right? But so when you start thinking like that, when you start putting that framework into your head, you start seeing it everywhere. And then you start asking yourself, is that what's happening here? Were the Queen and Farage and parts of City of London working to extricate themselves from Davos and getting the US angry at the Europeans? Again, British, there's no love lost between the British and the French. Ain't no love lost between the British and the Germans, right? Ain't no love lost between the British and the Russians. Like, they all hate each other. So it makes perfect sense that, when push came to shove and they saw the opportunity to go for the win, look, we're in an alliance now, and then he turns around and he backstab him. I've played enough games of this to know how many times I've done that to my friends, and they've looked at me and go, dude, you're cold. I'm like, I'm trying to win. And when you play the game to win, that's what you have to do. And so it becomes this, you at least have to entertain these things. I'm not saying I'm correct about this, but you have to start entertaining these ideas and then looking around and seeing if it fits. Like, I'm not trying to throw Farage, for example, under the bus here, or Lutnick or anybody else, but I have to ask these questions when they're in these particular moments in time, and then they do discordant things at particularly important moments. Like, really? I don't know who you work for. And I can't trust you, because this whole world is so, is fraught with so much stuff. It's so fraught with so much, fungible information, I guess is the best way of putting it.
Right.
And so, you know what I mean? Like, and so again, I'm trying to be, I'm trying to be careful here in how I explain this to people, but what I'm trying to do now is throw ideas up into the air and let people start to help me figure out what's going on, to be honest with you, because I'd like to know.
Do you see Trump disengaging from the East and moving more so towards the Western Hemisphere? Because Russia may not be the only vector that he pacifies. He already brokered the Gaza ceasefire deal. Now, whether or not that's broken again, that's a different story. But he did. Yeah, he did broker it with Witkoff. And another interesting interview from Davos was with the VP of Iran. And the VP of Iran was basically just saying, hey, we really want to normalize relations with the U.S. and we didn't really want this Hamas war, blah, 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 blah. Could Trump just completely disengage from the Eastern Hemisphere? Because it seems like his real main focus is to create Fortress America in the Western Hemisphere.
Yes. I give a lot of long-winded answers in this life, right? That one's easy. Yes. I think the ultimate desire here is for Trump and Putin, what everybody is scared of in the European Union, at Davos, at the 10 Downing Street, at GCHQ, all of them. I think what they're really worried about is that Trump and Putin come together and carve up the world. Say, look, we're leaving Israel to deal with itself, but you don't get to, but we're going to leave it in such a state that the Arabs aren't going to want to destroy it, the Arabs or the Persians or whomever. And on the other side, the Russians are going to be like, yes, and we can guarantee, because we're not going to help by proxy the Iranians going off half-cocked. Like, everybody has been placed into this maximum heightened sense of existential crisis, which is exactly when the people that are involved aren't reasoning. They're not seeing clearly, right? But it's also the moment where they see their own death and they have to go, we can't play the game anymore because this game is for keeps. So the rush up to that moment is always the hardest part for the observers to manage their anxiety over, because you can extrapolate where you are as you walk up the escalatory ladder, right? And then, it just takes 2 or 3 more steps. And then the question is, where's the top of the ladder? Is it 3 steps away? Is it 2 steps away? 1 step away? Do the people who are actually walking up the escalatory ladder, do they know where the top of the ladder is? Because if they don't, then we don't, and this thing could go off the rails very easily. That's a metaphoric way of saying, do the Israelis and the Iranians understand the height of the ladder? And are the Russians and the Americans, if they remove their guarantee from those 2 players on either side, what does the world look like? And then then those 2 guys have to realize, we're a lot closer to the escalatory ladder than we thought, because we don't have, the bullies standing behind us anymore. The bullies just want to trade with us. The bullies just want oil to flow around the world on both sides. The bullies just want trade and everything else. And the Iran's gib is really easy. They get oil and they get all sorts of stuff coming out of Russia through the international north-south transport corridor and through Belt and Road, crossing over their territory. The British are absolutely dead set against this happening. Okay. And because they don't control Iran, right? They don't have any levers to control Iran, at least as I understand it. And they want Israel to be that crossroads. And then by proxy themselves. And most of the Middle East, you can probably just argue from the perspective of them trying to get everybody else on board with that scenario, as opposed to the other one. So we upgrade the Sunni Shia divide by giving crazies, weapons and starting wars and drawing bad political borders and blah, 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 blah. And we get Sykes-Picot and we get all this crap. And all that can end if the United States and the Russians walk away. The United States stops being the guarantor of the remnant of British influence in that region. And then by the same token, so much of the Cold War grand game has been about trying to watch the Russians create not satraps, but states that are not hostile to them on their border. And the borderlands of Eastern Europe and Turkey and and all that. I'm perfectly willing to say, look, let's get a demilitarized zone all the way from the Barents Sea, not the Barents Sea, I guess it's up there, but the Baltic all the way down to the Sea of Aden. Just like a 200-mile strip wide, no conflict, no NATO, no nothing. Just get everybody out, let them all deal with each other, let them all redraw their political borders as they see fit. Let the Turks, who are the largest army in the area, be the policemen for a while. That'd be good for them. And that's that.
And then where does that leave the Western Hemisphere? If the U.S. does disengage from the East, Trump has 4 years to build out his Fortress America, Canada, Panama Canal, Greenland, maybe even Brazil through the election of Bolsonaro. How do you see with the Western Hemisphere after 4 years of Trump?
I see that the Western Hemisphere has everything it needs. There's nothing it needs in Europe other than trade. And we have a bad deal with trade. Trump, this morning, you've got both the VAT and the tariffs that make it impossible for us to sell our stuff in Europe. And we keep running this massive trade deficit with them. That's wrong. He's just like, he's clearly on top of it. And he wants cheap energy. He walked into Davos and said, we're going to drill. It's going to be a golden age of oil. He even said we're going to have coal as backup for all the power plants we're going to build. We need twice the amount of electricity that we currently have. We're going to get new oil and gas refineries or oil and diesel refineries. Because the idea, I mean, some of this is not like just evil, right? But that comes out of Davos. Some of it is just the solipsism of being European, meaning a large number of people crammed into a very small space. There's not, you drive 100 miles, you're in a different country. In the United States, you drive 100 miles and you're still in Florida.
Right.
You drive 100 miles, you're in almost every state in the union. Okay? We can't move to electric cars. There's not enough copper on the planet to run the electrical wires necessary to electrify the American transportation system. It doesn't exist. So clearly, all of the anti-transportation ideas that come out of Davos, whether they're well-intentioned European solipsism, because they see that it's unnecessary. Maybe in Europe, electric cars make sense. I don't give a shit. Build all the electric, drive all the electric cars you want. I don't care. But don't force that on me through backdooring your regulatory scheme onto us as a way to make us less competitive, which is all Trump went in there and just said. It has been saying, and I've been saying. It's nonsense.
Does this make you bearish? Does this make you bearish energy?
Not really. Because he's got to bring it all online, and we're going to burn all that energy. Like I don't see it. Not in the short term, no. In the long term, probably. But as of right now in 2025, no, we still have a supply crisis. We're still in a commodity cost push inflation environment. So I don't like to give, I like to do geopolitical trends far greater than one or 2 years. But as far as specific markets are concerned, I only like to look at things year to year. And this year, I think that, we're going to see oil prices are not going to come down. Trump wants them down. They're not going to come down. I think he has to deal with the fact that $25 a barrel oil is the equivalent of $13 a barrel oil in 1980. And, that's okay. We can handle that. We can handle that price regime, which then implies the median house price of $280,000 and a Dow at 45 grand and blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like all of those things are a function of the oil price. You cut the oil price down to $40 a barrel. No, like now everything else is going to wind up dropping with it. You're not going to unlock that. You can unlock some stuff at the margins. You can get rid of the corn subsidies. This is one of my pet peeves. Get rid of the corn subsidies, get rid of the corn blending, get the refinery capacity of the US up, get rid of the corn subsidies, and all of a sudden we can upgrade our refining capacity by 10 to 12%, and functional demand won't change because we'll stop blending corn ethanol into our gasoline. So there's 10 to 12% we can get rid of right now, and it wouldn't affect macro supply and demand numbers one barrel. And we can, stop the whole rotten nonsense about, burning food. Because that's what it is. Like, I remember years and years ago, I remember talking with a professor, and I think it was an English professor, to be honest, or a literature professor. And he said, we're going to look back one day at ourselves and we're going to be like, why in the holy, no, it was a chemistry professor. Why in the holy hell did we ever think we're going to look back at ourselves and go, how dumb were we to take such a beautiful thing as oil and burn it? Because there's so much we can do with it materially. Like, because that's where we are in the life cycle. We're doing the same thing with corn. We're overproducing it for the purposes of burning it. It's food. And it's, the perfect food to finish cows on so that I can have a good steak. And I want a good steak, and I don't want to pay $90 for it. It's dumb.
Well, I'd like a good steak too. I'm really hungry. I haven't had lunch yet. So let's go ahead and wrap things up here, Tom. Anything else you want to mention or talk about very briefly before we close things out?
I think just let's just watch this play out, and we'll come back in a month or two, and we'll do this again, and we'll be like, huh, this is coming. I don't think everybody has quite realized just how much he's already set in motion. The audits are happening, the shutdowns to the departments are happening, all of it's happening. The spending freeze, the hiring freezes, it's all happening, and he looks like a guy committed to.
He's definitely changed. His demeanor has changed. He seems more confident. He's not as erratic as he used to be. He just seems like he's in control.
He is, and he's got a great team around him. And the Democrats are looking at a buzzsaw, and then a concrete mixer if they think that they're going to screw with him in his cabinet appointments.
Yep. Well, hey, where can people find you, Tom?
TomLuongo.me, TFL1728 on X/Twitter, and Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns.
Okay. We'll have the links to that down below. Be sure to check it out, guys. If you got value out of this video, comment "Go Tom Go" in the comment section. Leave us a like and subscribe to the video so you don't miss an episode. Also, check us out on Substack, capitalcosm.substack.com, where you can get early access and ad-free versions of all of my videos, as well as uncensored versions for those videos that warrant it. And so with all that said, I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Tom, thank you for coming on. And guys, thank you for watching.